It's always hard to think objectively when stupid things happen, especially when family is involved. That's why I'd like an outside opinion about this. I am 28 years old and an entrepreneur who runs a fairly successful small business. I don't earn millions, but I make good profits and am doing quite well with something I started from a TikTok account. My brother, Mike, who is 30, is not a business owner. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's relevant. He's doing well in his job, which is great, and as far as I know, he's always been happy. Since we were kids, we got along pretty well. We were best friends, more or less, and we trusted each other with everything. I guess that was my first mistake. I have a background in engineering, and 3D printing has always been a hobby of mine. My company arose from a TikTok account where I shared my 3D printed creations. Some were just 3D sculpture figures that I designed, while others were useful tools or accessories for cars and desks. These accessories are not just simple prints, they are quite mechanically complicated, and many of them require several weeks of planning. It turned out there was a lot of demand for these accessories, so I started selling them. It was a decent side income for a while, until the demand grew so much that there was no way I could keep printing everything by myself. At that point, I contacted a manufacturer and looked at the logistics to mass-produce these items. Around this time, I started discussing my plans with my brother. As I said, we always trusted each other, and I didn't see how this could turn against me. Sometimes I shared ideas with him, and he gave me his opinion. Occasionally, his input was useful, but most of the time, it didn't amount to much. However, that didn't matter. The simple act of talking to him helped me think out loud and organize my ideas. I must point out that the central idea of the business was completely mine. He did not invent any of my products, nor did he help me develop them. He knew nothing about 3D printing, nor did he have the mechanical knowledge necessary to figure out how these accessories would work. So imagine my surprise when I discovered that he had been telling people, without any shame, that he had given me advice that made me successful. The first time it happened was at a family barbecue almost a year ago. I was moving around the garden trying to make sure everyone was well looked after. The atmosphere was relaxed, and everyone was having a good time. My Uncle Terry was running the grill, and my brother was talking to him. I grabbed a couple of beers and walked over to chat with them. I listened to the end of their conversation and heard Terry mention something about my business. By that time, things were going well. I was mass-producing merchandise and making a good profit. I handed them the cans and asked what they were talking about just to make conversation. Terry replied, saying Mike was telling him how he had helped me develop my best-selling product. I laughed and said, "Seriously? I thought that was a joke." My best-selling product is a particularly complicated piece that took me 4 months of research and prototyping to achieve. Obviously, he didn't help me with any of that. He's an accountant and doesn't really know how to develop, test, and manufacture a product of that type. But Mike stepped in and said, "Come on, man. You know you couldn't have done it without my help." He smiled, and I was left trying to figure out if he meant it or if it was really a joke, like I thought at first. Terry just laughed and said we shouldn't fight about it, and that was it. I forgot about the incident for a while. It really seemed like a friendly joke, so I didn't dwell on it. However, I couldn't forget about it after another family gathering a few months later. This time I was talking to one of my cousins about my products. He asked me when I was going to release something new. I made a joke about needing more time to fix the prototype issues. Then, my brother came over, put his arm around my shoulders, smiled, and said, "Remember, if you need help solving the problems again, I'm here, as usual." When he said that, I remembered the first incident and started to wonder if he was really trying to claim credit for my creations. I tried to handle the situation diplomatically, so I laughed and said, "I'll figure it out. I always do in the end." His voice got louder as he replied, "I usually do it after helping you." At that moment, the atmosphere in the room was getting a little awkward. The party was falling silent, and people started to look at us. I noticed he wasn't too steady on his feet. He had taken more than he should have and wasn't handling it well. He didn't seem completely drunk, but he was definitely a little dizzy. I've never seen the point in arguing with someone who's intoxicated, so I decided to take it lightly. "Mike, you know my designs are my babies. I wouldn't want to put you in a bind if people started asking questions about them." I hoped he would understand the message I was trying to give him. He didn't know anything about how these designs worked, and he would look like a fool if asked a few questions. Maybe he would understand what I was getting at, or maybe not. He seemed to get the hint, though. He stopped talking about helping me with my designs and started mentioning the advice he gave me. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I agreed that he had supported me when I needed it, and we left it at that. The atmosphere relaxed, and everyone went back to what they were doing before. After the party, we didn't talk for a few days. I was hoping he would text me, apologizing and explaining that he was drunk. When no apology came, it became clear to me that he really believed what he was saying. The words of a drunk are the thoughts of a sober man, or so they say. I decided to take the first step to fix this. I texted him and told him I appreciated that he was someone I could vent to when I needed to. However, I pointed out that he couldn't claim to be responsible for my success. I told him I appreciated his role in my journey, but reminded him that most of the hard work, the actual work, had been done by me. Of course, I appreciated his support, as well as the support of all the other family and friends who had helped me along the way. He didn't reply to my message until the next day. When he did, it was only with the eye roll emoji. I stared at my phone for a few minutes, hoping for some follow-up message or something more substantial, but that was all. That stupid emoji told me everything I needed to know. He was dismissing everything I said. That made me pretty mad, but I decided not to push it any further. I just wouldn't talk to him anymore after that. He clearly didn't respect my boundaries, so there was no point in trying to get him to see things my way. For the next few months, we barely talked. I focused on growing my business and eventually launched my new product. It worked better than I expected, and the first batch sold out in a week. Success only grew from there. My business went viral on social media, bringing a lot of attention to the rest of my store. The demand practically doubled overnight. That success made my family more interested in my work. Everyone supported me completely, except Mike. I didn't hear anything from him, and I honestly preferred it that way. I knew he couldn't take credit for this product since we hadn't talked during most of the development process. However, I didn't want to give him a chance to try. It turned out I didn't need to give him the opportunity because he was happy spreading lies behind my back. It all started when my father called me, saying he had something important to talk to me about. He said it in such a solemn way that I became worried. To make things worse, he refused to tell me what it was about until we met in person. I was half expecting some kind of terrible news, like being told I had months to live. Fortunately, it wasn't that, but it wasn't good news either. When I went to meet my father, he was waiting for me with my mom and Mike. My dad told me that Mike had complained to him, claiming that I was trying to deny his contribution to my company. Even worse, Mike had told my father that he believed he was owed compensation. I wish I could say I remained diplomatic, but that was the last straw for me. I asked my parents if they really believed him when he said he was responsible for my success. My dad was silent, but my mom said, "Everyone knows you guys talk about this stuff all the time." She added that it was pretty obvious Mike had contributed in some way to my success, and that the rest of the family thought so too. That's when I got mad. "You've been telling the rest of the family this nonsense?" I asked. Mike looked me straight in the eyes and said he didn't think there was any harm in telling people about his contributions. I was so angry, I practically started barking. My dad told me to calm down, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. But these designs and my company are accomplishments I am very proud of, and I told them I didn't appreciate them reducing my achievements to the result of someone else's input. I told Mike I was fed up with his lies. I pointed out that he didn't know anything about 3D printing or product design. I demanded that he send a message to everyone retracting his statements, or I would do it myself and make sure they all knew the truth. I was too upset to listen to anything they said after that. I just left and drove back home. They have called me several times, but I have not answered any of their calls so far. Mike has not attempted to get in touch either, and I doubt he's going to clear things up with our relatives. Am I the jerk here? My business is important to me, but he's my brother. Am I really exaggerating? Update 1. In my last post, I got a lot of responses saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. Just a few weeks after I was forced into that little family reunion, things got worse. I don't know who put these silly ideas into Mike's head, but he sent me a letter threatening legal action, claiming he was entitled to a share of my earnings because I used his intellectual contributions. Obviously, it wasn't a real legal letter, but it was written to look official. I guess he thought I had no experience with this kind of thing, and that an official-looking letter would be enough to scare me into giving him what he wanted. Thankfully, I have a lawyer I consult for all legal matters regarding my products and my business, something Mike would know if he were really as involved in my business as he claimed to be. I had my lawyer look over the letter, and he simply laughed, telling me there was nothing to worry about. However, he advised me to resolve the issue with my brother because Mike might be foolish enough to actually take it to court. My lawyer explained that, although the case was baseless, being dragged to court would cost me time and money, negatively affecting my business. Involving a lawyer was already expensive enough without having to go to trial, but I wasn't going to let things come to a head. I called Mike to try to work things out one last time. I told him I had received his letter and that I wasn't going to be bullied into giving him money. I let him know my attorney had reviewed it and that I was prepared to take this to court if necessary, though I preferred not to. He tried to interrupt me, saying he was only fighting for what was his, but I didn't let him. I told him he hadn't contributed to my business in any way that would entitle him to a single cent, and I wasn't going to allow him to rewrite history. I said that if he believed he could prove his contributions in court, we would let a judge decide. Before he could interrupt again, I pointed out that I had records of all my prototypes, emails, and project notes, none of which included any input from him. He went silent, but then just repeated that he was ready to fight for this. When he saw I wouldn't budge, he tried a different tactic. He claimed that money had changed me and accused me of destroying our family. I pointed out that he was the one who started telling lies to our family, ambushing me with our parents, and threatening legal action. At that, he had nothing else to say. I told him to wait for a response from my attorney and ended the call. After that, I had my attorney draft a letter threatening a countersuit for damages and defamation if Mike continued to try to undermine my business with false claims. I sent him the letter, and it seemed to work. I never heard anything about demands or compensation from him again. Unfortunately, that didn't stop him from talking behind my back. Mike continued to spread his side of the story to anyone who would listen. Some family members started treating me differently and looked at me strangely. Some even told me that he had been saying I had become conceited or that I had sold out now that I was successful. He also added the detail about my legal threat, conveniently omitting that he had threatened me with legal action first. When my aunt took me aside and asked if I couldn't just make peace with Mike, being the mature person, I decided enough was enough. This wasn't going away, whether I gave him credit or the payment he wanted. I called my lawyer to help me draft a formal clarification for the family and set the record straight. I had the evidence to back it up. My lawyer and I spent hours reviewing my prototypes, research notes, and messages with engineer friends who had been part of my brainstorming and testing sessions. Each document was time-stamped, showing that all ideas and designs were completely my own without any input from Mike. The letter detailed a timeline of my entrepreneurial journey and included photos of initial prototypes, blueprints, and emails with my manufacturer. I also attached copies of conversations I had with Mike, all of which were vague discussions with no real feedback from him. I sent the letter, along with supporting documents, to key family members, those who were likely to spread the information and those who seemed to have taken Mike's side. I wanted them to see that his claims were baseless and that his attempts to paint me as the black sheep of the family were based on lies. The letter had the desired effect. Some family members were shocked by the depth of evidence and came to apologize for not understanding before. Others were more reluctant to admit they had been wrong, but the letter left little room for doubt. Some still insisted I should pay Mike something for his brotherly support, but I ignored them. I knew I couldn't win everyone over straight away. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Since then, Mike hasn't been in touch to apologize or make any further threats, but I've heard he still tries to complain to some family members. My dad told me no one paid attention to it anymore. Everything was going well until my birthday came around. Normally, I'm not one to celebrate birthdays. But this time, I decided to throw a party for myself. I wanted to celebrate the recent success of my business, and I honestly felt like my life was finally heading in the direction I had always wanted. I sent invitations to friends and family who had supported me. As expected, I did not invite my brother. We hadn't talked in a while, and he hadn't come forward with any apologies. I didn't want him around to ruin the mood. I made it clear to my parents that Mike wasn't invited. They weren't too happy about it, but they didn't put up much resistance. The party turned out to be fantastic. Some good friends went to great lengths and prepared several surprises, which really made the night special for me. But guess who had to show up? One of my friends told me there was a commotion at the entrance. When I went to check, I found my brother arguing with the security team, insisting that he was too important to be left out. He was yelling that he was my brother and business partner. That got on my nerves. He kept spouting this absurd fantasy that he had played an important role in my business. Everyone in the family knew he was a liar, and yet he was there, making a fool of himself. At that moment, I realized he was never going to stop playing this game. I didn't have the energy to keep trying to reason with him. I was fed up. I told the security team to kick him out. He stared at me for a moment, then exploded, screaming and calling me a sellout who doesn't care about the people in his life. I told him to shut up and said I didn't want anything to do with him. I told him I didn't care if he was jealous of me, angry because he felt like he hadn't achieved anything in his life, or whatever feeling had led him to try to steal credit and drag me down. I was tired of listening to his complaints. I told him I didn't want to see him again and that he was banned from any future events I organized. Then, I turned my back on him and went back to enjoying the party. But my peace didn't last long. Someone told me I was needed in the parking lot. My first thought was that one of my guests was having trouble parking or getting in. Surprise! It was my brother making a fool of himself again. A small group of people had gathered around him, right next to my car. 2 people were holding him back, and he was trying to break free to get closer to my car. That's when I noticed the iron bar in his hand and the crack in the back window of my car. He was struggling to hit my car again. Now my blood was boiling. All the frustration I had been holding turned to anger, and I yelled, "What's your problem?" When he saw me approaching, he stopped struggling and dropped the iron bar. The people holding him must have thought he was no longer a threat and let him go. At that point, I was only a few inches away from him and didn't have much time to react. He threw a punch. I was slow to dodge, but I managed to get away enough that the punch only grazed my chin instead of hitting me full on. I was so angry that I didn't give him a chance to try again. I tackled him to the ground and hit him back. I only hit him once before I felt myself being pulled away. That's when I realized he was already unconscious. I had never been in a fight before, and I remember being surprised that someone could be knocked out so easily. Within a minute, he was already waking up. I sat on the sidewalk with ice on my chin while we waited for the police to arrive. I insisted on calling them. He had shown up uninvited, damaged my car, and attacked me. I was tired of being lenient with him. Once the police arrived, they took statements and arrested Mike. The atmosphere was ruined, and it was hard for me to enjoy the rest of the night, but I did the best I could. I felt it was a matter of principle not to let him ruin my party completely. The next few days were a whirlwind. I had to deal with my parents, who were furious with me for Mike's arrest. I had to point out to them that he had escalated things every step of the way, and that this time, he had taken things to a dangerous level. My dad said I had overreacted by calling the police, but I insisted that the vandalism of my car and the assault against me went beyond family drama. After filing charges, I focused on protecting myself and my business. I obtained a restraining order to keep him away from me and any events I might organize in the future. The legal process is ongoing, but he has already been ordered to pay for the damages to my car. The silver lining in all of this is that I haven't heard a single word from anyone saying he's claiming credit for my business anymore, which is a relief. Overall, I'm starting to get some normality back in my life. I still love some members of my family, but I've decided to protect my peace of mind at all costs. If that doesn't sit well with them, well, that's their problem, not mine. Update 2. I know you've been waiting for a new update, and here I am to share another one of the ridiculous things my brother has done. This time, my brother decided to copy my store, including my products, because, according to him, they're also his. The only problem for him is that the patents for the accessories say otherwise. And, of course, he hasn't dedicated a single second to designing anything. He didn't set out alone on this adventure of creating his store. He had to partner with someone else since he has no experience in this type of business. To add even more problems to his plan, he quit his job to start his own business. I suppose, in his head, he thought he could do just as well as me by simply copying, but he was very wrong. If he had come to me for advice, I would have recommended that he not quit his job. And, of course, I wouldn't have demanded part of his salary as a reward for my advice. I would have even let him take all the credit for any success. Despite contributing with my experience, as the good brother that I am, I wouldn't have gone running to tell the family that my brother still has his job thanks to my help. I know this sounds crazy, but it's just as crazy as everything my brother has done so far. Together with my lawyer, we did what we had to do. We sued him. He didn't just copy my designs. He made similar videos on TikTok and even took several aspects of my store's name. Basically, he was too inspired by my business. I know he didn't invest little, as buying 3D printers is not cheap. At least he didn't get to the point of sourcing suppliers and spending money on merchandise, because it would have been much worse for him. The lawsuit went in our favor since his products were extremely similar to mine. He was ordered to stop selling them and also pay compensation. During the trial, he tried to argue that he had participated in the original idea and that, therefore, the prototypes and designs were partially his. However, when it came time to prove it with evidence, he couldn't. There's no proof that he worked on any of it because, honestly, he didn't. Even so, he continues to claim that he contributed a lot and that I owe him credit and money. At this point, he sounds like that crazy guy everyone humors at family gatherings just to avoid arguments. Even my Uncle Terry, who isn't exactly known for being the calmest guy, told him to stop talking nonsense and to start working. Not even a judge believes his stories. That ended in a heated argument between them, but luckily, I wasn't present. For that, I'm grateful because I don't know if I could stand another one of his self-righteous speeches about how he has so much claim over other people's work. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.